She walked into my chaotic room, dropped everything, and smiled like she knew a secret that would change my life forever. The clock on the wall showed 2:30 a.m., and Lily was still hunched over her desk, surrounded by a mountain of textbooks that seemed to grow taller every hour. Her small dorm room looked like a tornado had hit it. Papers were scattered everywhere. Empty coffee cups sat on every surface, and clothes lay forgotten on the chair she hadn't sat in for days. Finals week was the worst time of the year. Everyone on campus walked around like zombies, carrying thick books and wearing the same tired expressions. But Lily felt it more than most. She had always been the type of person who needed everything to be perfect. Her notes were color-coded, her schedule was planned down to the minute, and her grade point average was something she checked obsessively every week. Her roommate was completely different. While Lily stressed about every assignment, her roommate seemed to float through college life with an ease that both amazed and frustrated her. They had been living together for 3 months now, but they barely knew each other beyond polite morning greetings and shared bathroom schedules. The girl had an interesting way about her. She painted in the common area sometimes, leaving colorful canvases propped against the walls. She listened to music that Lily had never heard before, songs with deep lyrics and haunting melodies that drifted through their shared space. Sometimes, Lily caught herself stopping her own work just to listen. But tonight, Lily was too focused on her organic chemistry textbook to think about anything else. The formulas on the page were starting to blur together, and she rubbed her tired eyes. For the 100th time. She had put a Do Not Disturb sign on her door hours ago, hoping to avoid any interruptions. Her phone was on silent, her social media was logged off, and she had even unplugged her small television. That's why the soft creak of her door opening surprised her so much. Lily looked up from her textbook, expecting to see someone from down the hall who had ignored her sign. Instead, she saw her roommate standing in the doorway holding a basket of laundry. The girl stepped into the room slowly, as if she wasn't sure whether she should come in or not. "Sorry," she said quietly, lifting the basket slightly. "I think some of your clothes got mixed up with mine when I did laundry earlier." Lily blinked, trying to focus on something other than chemical equations for the first time in hours. "Oh, thanks. You can just put them anywhere." But instead of quickly dropping off the clothes and leaving, her roommate took a step further into the room. Then another. She looked around at the chaos that had taken over every inch of space. Books were stacked on the bed, highlighters were scattered across the floor, and sticky notes covered the walls like colorful confetti. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Lily felt embarrassed about the mess, but too tired to apologize for it. Her roommate's eyes moved from the overflowing trash can to the coffee maker that had been running almost non-stop for 3 days. Then something unexpected happened. Without any warning, her roommate let go of the laundry basket. Clean clothes spilled across the floor, mixing with the papers and books that were already there. But she didn't seem bothered by the mess she had just created. Instead, she looked directly at Lily and smiled. Not a polite roommate smile, but something bolder, something that seemed to say she had just figured out something important. "You know what?" she said, settling down cross-legged right there among the scattered clothes. "I've been watching you kill yourself with all this studying for weeks now." Lily felt her cheeks get warm. "I'm not killing myself. I'm just trying to do well in my classes." "When was the last time you left this room for something other than class or the bathroom?" The question caught Lily off guard. She tried to remember but couldn't. Had it been 3 days? 4? Time had become meaningless during finals week. "I don't have time for anything else right now," Lily said, gesturing toward her textbooks. "I have 2 exams tomorrow and a paper due on Friday." Her roommate nodded, but her expression didn't change. If anything, her smile got a little wider. "I failed organic chemistry, twice." This was news to Lily. She had assumed her roommate was just naturally smart, the kind of person who didn't need to study much to do well. "Really? Really? The first time I thought I just needed to study harder. So I did exactly what you're doing right now. I stayed up all night, I memorized every formula, I made flashcards until my fingers cramped up." She picked up one of Lily's highlighters and examined it like it was some kind of ancient artifact. I still failed. Lily felt a knot form in her stomach. If someone could fail even after studying that hard, what hope did she have? The second time, her roommate continued, I did the same thing, but even more. I barely slept, I barely ate, I turned into this stressed-out zombie who couldn't think about anything except chemistry. And you know what happened? You failed. Again? I failed again. But worse than that, I made myself sick. Like, actually sick. I ended up in the campus health center because I hadn't been taking care of myself at all. Lily looked around at her own room, seeing it suddenly through different eyes. The empty food containers, the unwashed clothes, the complete absence of anything that wasn't related to studying. She was doing exactly the same thing. So what changed? Lily asked. Her roommate's bold smile returned. I learned something that they don't teach you in any textbook. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the smartest thing to do, which is admitting that the way you're doing something isn't working. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt different, less tense. Lily realized that for the first time in days, she wasn't thinking about chemistry formulas or upcoming exams. She was thinking about this girl who had just walked into her chaotic world and somehow made it feel less overwhelming. I'm scared, Lily admitted, the words coming out before she could stop them. If I don't get perfect grades, I'll disappoint everyone. My parents, my professors, myself. Her roommate nodded like she understood completely. I know that feeling. But can I tell you something that might sound crazy? Lily nodded. Sometimes disappointing people is the first step toward finding out who you really are. As those words settled in the air between them, Lily felt something shift inside her chest. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. For the first time in months, she wondered if there might be a different way to approach her life. A way that didn't involve turning herself into a stress-filled machine. Outside their window, the campus was quiet except for the occasional sound of other students still awake, probably struggling with their own mountains of work. But inside this messy room, sitting among scattered clothes and textbooks, something new was beginning. The next morning came too soon. Lily had barely slept after her roommate left her room the night before. Those words kept spinning in her head. Sometimes disappointing people is the first step toward finding out who you really are. She had stared at the ceiling until dawn, thinking about what that could possibly mean. When her alarm went off at 6 a.m., she felt like she had been hit by a truck, but there was something different about the exhaustion today. Instead of the panicked, heart-racing tiredness she had been feeling all week, this felt more like the calm after a storm. She shuffled to the kitchen to make her usual strong coffee, and found her roommate already there, humming quietly while making scrambled eggs. The smell filled the small space, and Lily's stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had barely eaten real food in days. Morning, her roommate said without turning around. Want some? I made extra. Lily hesitated. She had planned to grab a granola bar and get straight back to studying, but the eggs smelled incredible, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for her. Sure, she said, surprising herself. They sat at their small kitchen table, and Lily took her first real bite of food in what felt like forever. It tasted amazing. Everything tasted more vivid somehow, like she had been living in black and white and someone had just turned on the color. So, her roommate said, taking a sip of orange juice, I have a confession to make. Lily looked up from her eggs, curious. I wasn't always an art therapy major. I started college as pre-med, just like half the kids here. I was going to be a doctor, make my parents proud, save lives, the whole thing. This was surprising. Lily had always pictured her roommate as someone who had always known exactly what she wanted to do. She seemed so confident, so sure of herself. What happened? Her roommate laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I crashed and burned, that's what happened. First semester I was getting C's and D's in classes I thought I'd ace. I kept telling myself I just needed to work harder, study more, sleep less. Lily nodded. This sounded familiar. By second semester, I was a complete mess. I was taking 18 credit hours, volunteering at the hospital, and trying to do undergraduate research. I thought that's what successful pre-med students did. She paused, to take another bite. I ended up having what I guess you'd call a breakdown, right there in the middle of chemistry lab. What kind of breakdown? The crying so hard you can't breathe kind. The kind where the professor has to call campus security because you're hyperventilating and can't calm down. Her roommate's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was talking about the weather. Turns out when you push yourself past your limit, your body and mind have ways of making you stop. Lily set down her fork. That sounds terrifying. It was. But you know what? It was also the best thing that ever happened to me. How can a breakdown be the best thing that ever happened to you? Her roommate smiled, and Lily was starting to recognize that this was her thinking smile. Because it forced me to ask myself, a question I had been avoiding for months, what did I actually want? And what did you want? That's the thing, I had no idea. I had been so busy trying to become what I thought I should become that I had never stopped to figure out what I actually enjoyed doing. She gestured around their apartment, and Lily noticed for the first time how many art supplies were scattered around the living room. So I started experimenting. With art? With everything. I took a pottery class just because it sounded fun. I joined the campus radio station because I liked music. I started volunteering at the community center, working with kids who had been through tough situations. Her eyes lit up as she talked, and slowly, I started to figure out what made me feel alive, instead of just what made me feel busy. Lily had never thought about the difference between feeling alive and feeling busy, but as soon as her roommate said it, she knew exactly what she meant. For months, maybe years, she had been confusing the two. The art therapy thing came later, her roommate continued. I was working with these kids who had trouble talking about their feelings, but when we gave them paint and paper, they could express things they couldn't say with words. It was like watching magic happen. So you changed your major? Eventually. But first I had to have some very difficult conversations with my parents about how their dream for my life wasn't the same as my dream for my life. Lily felt her chest tighten. How did they take it? Not well at first. There was a lot of crying, a lot of disappointment, a lot of questions about whether I was throwing my life away. She paused. But you know what's funny? Now 3 years later, they tell people about my work all the time. They're proud of me in a way they never were when I was struggling through pre-med. Because you're good at what you do now? Because I'm happy. And when someone you love is genuinely happy, it's hard to argue with that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, finishing their breakfast. Lily's mind was racing, but not with the frantic energy of the past few weeks. This was different. She was thinking about possibilities instead of just problems. Can I ask you something? Lily said finally. Of course. Last night, you said sometimes disappointing people is the first step toward finding out who you really are. Did you really mean that? Her roommate considered the question carefully. I think what I meant is that sometimes we get so focused on meeting other people's expectations that we forget to check whether those expectations actually fit who we are. She pushed her empty plate away and leaned forward. Like, what if the version of success that everyone has been pushing on you isn't actually success for you? But how do you know the difference? You start paying attention to how different things make you feel. Really paying attention. She stood up and started clearing their dishes. When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Not because it would look good on your resume, not because it would impress your parents, not because it was what you were supposed to do. Just because it brought you joy. Lily tried to think of an answer, but came up blank. She couldn't remember the last time she had done anything purely for the joy of it. I used to write, she said suddenly, surprising herself. Poetry, stories, little observations about people and places. I had notebooks full of it. What happened to that? I got busy with more important things. Her roommate turned around from the sink, and that bold smile was back. What if I told you that the things that bring you joy might actually be the most important things of all? Before Lily could answer, her roommate was already heading toward her own room. I have an idea, she called over her shoulder. But you'll have to trust me. Lily sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the lingering smell of breakfast and the warmth of the most honest conversation she'd had in months. For the first time in a long time, she was curious about what would happen next instead of worried about it. Outside, she could hear other students hurrying to their morning classes, probably carrying the same stress she had been carrying just 24 hours ago. But inside their apartment, something was shifting. Something that felt like the beginning of a different kind of education entirely. 2 hours later, Lily found herself standing outside the campus art building feeling completely out of place. She was supposed to be in advanced biology right now, taking notes on cellular respiration. Instead, she was following her roommate's mysterious plan, carrying a backpack full of art supplies she didn't know how to use. "This feels wrong," Lily said, checking her phone for the third time. "I've never skipped class in my life." Her roommate pushed open the heavy door to the art building. "That's exactly why we're doing this." The inside of the building was nothing like the sterile academic buildings where Lily spent most of her time. The walls were covered with student artwork, paintings and sculptures and photographs that seemed to pulse with life and energy. The air smelled like paint and clay and something else she couldn't identify, but somehow made her feel more relaxed. "Welcome to my world," her roommate said, leading her down a hallway, lined with large windows that let in streams of natural light. They entered a studio space that was completely different from any classroom Lily had ever seen. Instead of neat rows of desks, there were easels scattered around the room, work tables covered with supplies, and students working on projects that seemed to have nothing to do with grades or tests. "Okay," her roommate said, setting down a large canvas on one of the empty easels. "I want you to try something. But first, you have to promise me you won't worry about whether it's good or bad." Lily stared at the blank white surface. "I don't know how to paint." "Perfect. That means you can't do it wrong." This logic made no sense to Lily, but something about the way her roommate said it made her want to try. She picked up a brush, dipped it in blue paint, and made a small mark on the canvas. It felt strange but oddly satisfying. "Now what?" she asked. "Now you stop thinking and start feeling." "What does organic chemistry feel like to you?" "What do you mean, what does it feel like?" "Close your eyes. Think about sitting in that lecture hall looking at all those formulas and diagrams. What's the first feeling that comes up?" Lily closed her eyes and immediately felt her chest get tight. Overwhelmed, like I'm drowning in information. "Good. Paint that." For the next hour, Lily found herself creating something she never could have imagined. The canvas filled with swirls of blue and gray, representing the feeling of being underwater, struggling to breathe. Then streaks of red appeared, showing her frustration and panic. Yellow dots scattered across the surface like the fragments of information she was trying to grasp. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't realistic, but it was honest. For the first time in months, she was expressing exactly how she felt instead of trying to hide it or push through it. "This is amazing," her roommate said, looking at the finished piece. "It's a mess. It's your mess, and that makes it beautiful." Lily stepped back and looked at what she had created. Her roommate was right. It was messy and chaotic and probably wouldn't make sense to anyone else. But it was hers. It represented something real about her experience that she had never been able to put into words. "How do you feel?" her roommate asked. Lily considered the question. "Lighter somehow. Like I just set something down that I didn't realize I was carrying." That's what art can do. It gives you a way to get the feelings out of your head and onto something else, so they don't just bounce around inside you forever. They spent the rest of the morning working on different projects. Her roommate showed her how to create visual mind maps of her coursework, turning boring lecture notes into colorful, interconnected webs that actually made the information easier to understand and remember. But the real surprise came when they were cleaning up their supplies. "So," her roommate said casually, "there's this open mic night tonight at the coffee shop downtown." Lily looked up from washing paintbrushes. "Okay. I think you should perform something." "Perform what?" "I don't sing or play instruments." "You said you used to write poetry." Lily felt her stomach drop. That was a long time ago, and it wasn't very good. "When was the last time you read any of it?" "I don't know. High school, maybe? Her roommate dried her hands and turned to face Lily directly. So you're basing your opinion of your own writing on what you thought about it when you were 17? Put that way, it did sound a little ridiculous. Besides, her roommate continued, good and bad aren't really the point. The point is expressing something true about your experience. And from what I saw you create this morning, I think you have a lot of truth inside you that wants to come out. Lily felt the familiar panic starting to rise in her chest. I can't get up in front of people and read poetry. I'm not that kind of person. What kind of person? The brave kind. The confident kind. The kind who doesn't care what people think. Her roommate smiled, and Lily could tell this was leading somewhere important. Can I tell you something that might surprise you? Lily nodded. I used to be exactly like you. Terrified of what people would think, convinced that I had to be perfect before I could share anything with the world. She gestured around the art studio. The first time I showed my work to anyone, I literally threw up from nerves. Really? Really? But you know what I learned? Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and doing the thing anyway. They walked back across campus in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Lily's mind kept returning to the notebooks full of poetry sitting in a box under her bed. She hadn't looked at them in years, convinced they were embarrassing reminders of a time when she thought she might become a writer. But what if her roommate was right? What if the problem wasn't that her writing was bad, but that she had stopped being brave enough to share the parts of herself that felt most true? Back in their apartment, Lily found herself standing in front of her bedroom door, key in hand, but unable to turn it. Second thoughts? Her roommate asked gently. What if I get up there and completely freeze? What if people laugh? What if I realize that the writing really is terrible and I've been fooling myself all these years? What if you get up there and remember who you used to be before you got so worried about who you were supposed to become? The question hit Lily like a physical force. She thought about the girl who used to fill notebooks with observations about the world around her, who saw poetry in ordinary moments, who believed that words had the power to make people feel less alone. When had she stopped being that person? There's something else, her roommate said. Something I didn't tell you about my breakdown in chemistry lab. Lily waited. The reason I was crying wasn't just because I was stressed about grades. It was because I had gotten so far away from who I really was that I didn't recognize myself anymore. I looked in the mirror and saw this exhausted stranger who was trying so hard to be someone else that she had forgotten how to be herself. Lily felt tears forming in her eyes because she knew exactly what her roommate was talking about. She had been that stranger for months now, maybe longer. The open mic thing, her roommate said softly. It's not really about the poetry. It's about giving yourself permission to be seen as who you actually are instead of who you think you should be. That evening, as the sun set outside their window, Lily sat on her bed with a dusty box of notebooks open beside her. She was reading poems she had written years ago, and to her surprise, they weren't terrible. They were honest and raw and full of the kind of feelings she had been trying so hard to hide lately. Her roommate appeared in the doorway, dressed for going out, holding 2 cups of tea. So, she said, settling cross-legged on the bed next to Lily. What's the verdict? Lily looked down at a poem about feeling lost in a world that seemed to know exactly where it was going. The words on the page seemed to be speaking directly to her current situation. I think, she said slowly, I might be ready to be brave. Her roommate's smile was brighter than any of the paintings hanging in the art studio. Then let's go remind you who you really are. The coffee shop was packed with college students, local artists, and people who looked like they belonged in this kind of creative space. Lily clutched her old notebook against her chest, feeling completely out of place among the confident-looking performers warming up near the small stage. I can't do this, she whispered to her roommate for the 5th time since they had arrived. Yes, you can, her roommate replied calmly, ordering them both hot chocolate from the counter. But first, let's just sit and watch for a while. They found a small table near the back of the room, and Lily tried to focus on the performers instead of the growing knot in her stomach. The first person on stage was a guitar player who sang about heartbreak, with a voice that made everyone in the room stop talking. The second was a spoken word artist who told a story about growing up in a small town, that had everyone laughing and nodding along. Each performer seemed so natural up there, like being on stage was as easy as having a conversation with friends. Lily couldn't imagine ever feeling that comfortable in front of people. "They make it look so easy," she said, watching a young woman perform a poem about her grandmother. "That's because they're not trying to be perfect," her roommate observed. "They're just trying to be honest." As the evening continued, Lily started to notice something interesting. Not every performance was polished or professional. Some people stumbled over words, others forgot lines, and one guitar player had to restart his song twice because he messed up the chords. But the audience didn't seem to care. If anything, those imperfect moments made the performances feel more real, more human. "Sign-up sheet is still open," the host announced during a break between performers. "We've got room for a few more brave souls tonight." Lily's hands started sweating. Her roommate didn't say anything, but she pushed the sign-up sheet across their small table until it was sitting right in front of Lily's notebook. "What if I forget everything I want to say? Then you'll remember some of it, and that will be enough. What if my voice shakes? Then people will know you're nervous and they'll relate to that because everyone gets nervous. What if the poem isn't good enough?" Her roommate leaned forward and spoke quietly but firmly. "What if it's exactly what someone in this room needs to hear tonight?" That question stopped Lily's spiral of worry completely. She hadn't thought about the possibility that her words might actually help someone else. She had been so focused on her own fear that she forgot poetry wasn't just about the person writing it. She looked around the room and saw faces that looked just like hers had looked a few days ago. Tired college students, people who seemed stressed or lost or like they were carrying invisible weights on their shoulders. What if one of her old poems could make just one person feel less alone? Before she could change her mind, she grabbed the pen and wrote her name on the sign-up sheet. "There," she said, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. "I did it." Her roommate's smile was brighter than the stage lights. "I'm so proud of you." They sat through 3 more performances, and with each one, Lily felt a little more confident. These weren't professional entertainers or published poets. They were regular people sharing pieces of their lives, their struggles, their hopes. Maybe she belonged here after all. When the host called her name, Lily felt like she was moving through water. Everything seemed slow and surreal as she walked to the front of the room, her notebook clutched in trembling hands. The stage lights were brighter than she expected, and for a moment she couldn't see the audience at all. She opened her notebook to a poem she had written during her senior year of high school, when she was applying to colleges and feeling overwhelmed by everyone's expectations for her future. The words on the page seemed to glow under the lights. "This is called Heavy Dreams," she said into the microphone, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Then she began to read. "They handed me dreams that weren't mine to carry, heavy as stones in a backpack too small. Be this," they said. "Become that. Make us proud," they whispered. Until I forgot what made me proud of myself. I learned to walk with my shoulders bent, learned to smile when inside I was breaking, learned to say I'm fine in a voice that didn't sound like mine anymore. But sometimes in the quiet moments I remember the girl who used to write stories on napkins during lunch, who saw poetry in rain puddles and found magic in ordinary Tuesday afternoons. I wonder if she's still in there somewhere, waiting for permission to dream her own dreams, to set down the heavy stones and pick up something lighter, something that feels like flying instead of drowning. Maybe being brave isn't about carrying more weight. Maybe being brave is about choosing which dreams are actually yours. When she finished, the coffee shop was completely silent. For a terrifying moment, Lily thought she had said something wrong, that the poem was too personal or too sad. She looked out at the audience and saw faces staring back at her with expressions she couldn't read. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, and some people were wiping their eyes. A woman near the front was nodding like Lily had just said exactly what she needed to hear. Lily felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening that had been locked for years. This was what her roommate had been talking about. This feeling of being truly seen, of sharing something real and having it matter to other people. She looked toward their table and saw her roommate standing up, clapping harder than anyone else, in the room with tears streaming down her face. The pride and joy in her expression made Lily feel like she could fly. Walking back to their table felt completely different from walking to the stage. Her legs felt steady now, her breathing was calm, and the notebook in her hands felt lighter somehow. "That was incredible," her roommate said, pulling her into a hug the moment she sat down. "You were incredible. I can't believe I actually did that." "How do you feel?" Lily thought about the question. How did she feel? Alive. Present. Like herself, for the first time in months. "I feel like I remember who I am." They stayed until the open mic ended, listening to the remaining performers with new ears. Lily found herself thinking about the stories behind each poem, each song, each brave moment of vulnerability shared in this small, warm space. As they walked home through the quiet campus streets, neither of them said much, but the silence felt comfortable and full of possibility. The night air was cool against Lily's face, and she could still feel the rush of adrenaline from performing. "Thank you," she said finally as they reached their apartment building. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Her roommate stopped walking and turned to face her under the soft glow of the streetlight. "You want to know a secret?" Lily nodded. "I didn't see anything in you that wasn't already there. I just helped you remember it was there." They stood there for a moment, looking at each other in the gentle light, and Lily felt something electric pass between them. It wasn't just gratitude or friendship, though those feelings were definitely there. It was recognition, connection, the sense that they truly understood each other in a way that felt rare and precious. "What happens now?" Lily asked softly. Her roommate smiled, that bold, confident smile that had started this whole journey. "Now you keep being brave. Keep writing. Keep sharing your voice with the world." "And what about us?" The question hung in the air between them, full of possibilities neither of them had dared to speak about before tonight. "I think," her roommate said, stepping a little closer, "that the best stories are the ones where both people help each other become who they're meant to be." As they climbed the stairs to their apartment, Lily felt like she was floating. Tomorrow, she would still have exams to take and assignments to complete, but everything felt different now. She wasn't just a student trying to meet other people's expectations anymore. She was a poet, a person with something valuable to say, someone brave enough to share her truth with the world. More than that, she was someone who had found a real connection with another person, someone who saw her completely and still chose to stand beside her, encouraging her to be her most authentic self. The future felt wide open, full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine before tonight. 3 weeks later, Lily's life looked completely different, but in ways that would have surprised anyone watching from the outside. She still studied hard, still attended every class, still cared about her grades. But now those things were balanced, with poetry workshops, art projects, and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. The change wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was more like she had been living in a house with all the curtains drawn, and someone had finally opened them to let in the light. Everything was the same, but also completely transformed. Her study space reflected this shift. Where before, there had been only textbooks and highlighters, now there were sketchbooks and notebooks filled with poems. Her chemistry notes were illustrated with little drawings that helped her remember complex formulas. Her biology homework sat next to a canvas where she painted what different cellular processes might look like if they were emotions. "You seem different," her lab partner commented during their weekly chemistry session. "More relaxed or something?" Lily smiled, mixing a solution with steady hands. "I guess I figured out how to study in a way that doesn't make me want to disappear." It was true. Her grades hadn't dropped like she had feared they would. If anything, they had improved slightly. When learning felt creative instead of just memorization, when she could connect new information to things that brought her joy, everything became easier to understand and remember. But the biggest change was in her relationship with her roommate. What had started as polite coexistence had grown into something neither of them had expected. They cooked breakfast together most mornings, sharing stories and dreams over scrambled eggs and coffee. They studied together in the evenings, sometimes working in comfortable silence, sometimes helping each other with difficult concepts. And they had become something more than friends, though neither of them had put a name to it yet. There were moments of connection that felt electric, conversations that lasted until sunrise, shared glances that said more than words ever could. Tonight, Lily had a plan of her own. She stood outside her roommate's bedroom door, holding a small canvas and a folded piece of paper, feeling nervous in the best possible way. Over the past few weeks, she had been working on a surprise, something to show her gratitude for everything that had changed since that night when her roommate first stepped into her chaotic room. The painting was small but meaningful. It showed two figures sitting together under a starry sky, surrounded by books and art supplies with words floating between them like visible conversation. It wasn't technically perfect, but it captured something true about their friendship and the way they had helped each other grow. The poem was more personal. She had written it the week before, trying to put into words what it felt like to rediscover yourself through someone else's eyes. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly on the door. "Come in," came the familiar voice from inside. Lily stepped into the room slowly, just as her roommate had done weeks earlier. The space was warm and inviting, filled with artwork and plants and books that reflected the creative spirit of the person who lived there. Her roommate was sitting cross-legged on her bed, working on a sketch that looked like it might be a portrait of someone, though Lily couldn't see the details from where she stood. "I have something for you," Lily said, her heart beating fast with nervous excitement. Her roommate looked up with curious eyes, setting aside her sketch. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just wanted to say thank you." Lily held out the painting first. "I know it's not very good, but I wanted to try to capture what these past few weeks have felt like." Her roommate took the canvas carefully, studying it with the same attention she gave to her own artwork. As she looked at the painted figures and the floating words, her expression grew soft and amazed. "Lily, this is beautiful. Look at how you've used color to show emotion and the way you've made the words part of the composition." She looked up with shining eyes. "You really have been paying attention in those art sessions." "There's also this," Lily said, holding out the folded paper with hands that trembled slightly. Her roommate unfolded the poem and began to read silently. Lily watched her face, trying to gauge her reaction, feeling more vulnerable than she had even during the open mic performance. The poem was called "Learning to See," and it talked about how sometimes you needed someone else to believe in you before you could believe in yourself. It described the feeling of being lost and then found, of discovering that courage wasn't something you were born with, but something you could learn. The last stanza was about gratitude, about how the best teachers were the ones who didn't just show you new information, but showed you new ways of being yourself. When her roommate finished reading, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at Lily with an expression that was difficult to interpret. "This is about us," she said softly. "It's about what you did for me, how you helped me remember who I used to be, and figure out who I wanted to become." Her roommate set the poem down carefully and patted the bed beside her, inviting Lily to sit. "Can I tell you something?" Lily nodded, settling cross-legged on the comfortable bed. "You keep talking about what I did for you, but you have no idea what you did for me." "What do you mean?" "When I first stepped into your room that night, I wasn't planning to stay and talk. I was just going to drop off your laundry and leave." She smiled at the memory. "But when I saw you there, so focused and determined and completely exhausted, it reminded me of myself a few years ago." "In a bad way?" "In a way that made me want to help, but also in a way that reminded me why I chose the path I'm on now." She picked up the poem again, holding it like it was something precious. "Working with you these past few weeks, watching you discover your creative side, seeing you perform at the open mic, it reminded me why I love what I do." Lily felt warmth spreading through her chest. "Really? Really? You think I was teaching you, but you were teaching me too, about courage." about the importance of supporting each other, about how amazing it is to watch someone bloom when they finally have the right conditions. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of them processing the weight of what they had shared. Outside, the campus was settling into its nighttime rhythm, but inside this cozy room, time felt suspended. "I have something for you too," her roommate said eventually, reaching for the sketch she had been working on when Lily arrived. She turned it around, and Lily gasped. It was a drawing of her, but not as she usually saw herself. In this portrait, she looked confident and peaceful, holding a notebook and pen with a slight smile that suggested she was thinking about something that brought her joy. "Is that really how you see me?" Lily asked, touching the edge of the paper gently. "That's how you look when you're writing. When you're completely yourself and not worried about what anyone else thinks." Lily studied the drawing, amazed by the person staring back at her. This version of herself looked like someone she wanted to be, someone she was learning to become. "We make a good team," her roommate said, gesturing between the painting, the poem, and the sketch. "We do," Lily agreed. Then, feeling bolder than she had ever felt in her life, she added, "I was wondering if you'd like to make it official." "Official? I mean, if you'd like to be more than roommates who help each other with creative projects and personal growth." Her roommate's smile was radiant. "Are you asking me out?" "I think I am, though I'm not entirely sure how to do this properly." "Well," her roommate said, scooting closer until their knees were touching, "I think you're doing just fine." "So is that a yes?" Instead of answering with words, her roommate leaned forward and kissed her softly, a gentle touch that felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "That's definitely a yes," her roommate whispered. As they sat together on the bed, surrounded by their artwork and poems, Lily reflected on how much had changed since that exhausted night when her roommate first stepped into her chaotic room. She had discovered parts of herself she thought were lost forever, learned that vulnerability could be a strength, and found someone who loved her for exactly who she was. More than that, she had learned to be bold in her own way. Not the dramatic, attention-seeking kind of boldness, but the quiet courage of being authentic, of sharing her truth, of choosing connection over perfection. "What are you thinking about?" her roommate asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just how different everything is now, how different I am. You're not different, you're just more yourself." Lily considered this. Her roommate was right. The person she was now wasn't someone new, but rather someone who had always been there, waiting for the right moment and the right encouragement to emerge. "Thank you," she said, "for stepping into my room that night and changing everything. Thank you for being brave enough to let me." Outside their window, the campus was quiet except for the occasional sound of late-night studiers and the distant music from someone's dorm room. But inside, surrounded by art and poetry and the comfortable warmth of newfound love, the future felt bright and full of possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine just a few weeks before. This was how transformation really happened, Lily realized. Not through dramatic gestures or sudden revelations, but through small acts of courage, daily choices to